Hello, investigators, and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Veronica. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's the end of 2023, and with 2024 and the Hemlock Vale right around the corner, we have a lot of preview cards to be talking about. There are going to be 8 new cards plus a investigator deck building in this video, and as with the last video, I might not be going fully in depth on all of these cards, but I'm going to be doing my best to at least give you some idea about what they are, how they work, and what kind of decks I expect to see them in. Starting up with the most exciting card, it is Hank's deck building. Thank you, Great Old One Gaming, for previewing it for us. Hank Simpson, the farmhand, was previewed in the FFG announcement article, but his deck building has eluded us so far, but now we finally know. His deck size is 35, bigger than most investigators, but his deck building options are survivor cards 0 to 5, neutral cards 0 to 5, and then up to 10 other innate and or spirit cards 0 to 2. For long-time Survivor players, this might sound a little familiar. Calvin and Silas also specifically care about innate and spirit cards. His deck building requirements are 1 copy of Stout-Hearted and 1 copy of Wear Spa, as long as a random basic weakness. In case you forgot what Hank does, he is the assistant and warden, and basically he starts the game as a 3-1-5-3 that can be assigned damage and horror from ally assets or other investigators at his location. When he would be defeated, however, he heals all of his damage and horror and then flips into either of his resolute modes, being either a 3-3-4-4 that whenever he's assigned horror lets him draw cards, or a 4-1-6-3 that whenever he takes damage gains resources. However, in both of his resolute modes, he cannot be healed. So Hank's been an interesting character that I've been really looking forward to seeing his deck building so we can start theory crafting him. However, I haven't really gotten a chance to try him yet, so keep in mind that a lot of this is speculation, and as such, I'm not really going into the depths of what you can do with his deck, but I am going to take a look at what innate and spirit get him. Specifically, of course, out of class innate and spirit. We're not talking about survivor cards, he could take those anyway. Spirit has a lot of the Calvin classics. Both him and Calvin share a little bit of overlap in the design space of when they take damage and horror, they get more powerful. For Calvin, it's a more gradual sliding scale. For Hank, it's a sudden burst of power when he flips to his second mode. But in either case, I could see cards like Solemn Vow or Toe to Toe, which let you take damage and horror to do a thing or soak for your teammates, be quite powerful. On top of that, because Hank cannot be healed, it is important for him to have ways to mitigate damage. In Survivor, we see Leather Coat, Keepsake, Jessica Hyde, and Peter Sylvester, but also a classic like I've Had Worse Level 2, which can cancel up to 2 damage and horror to gain resources. Fantastic. Finally, a card that is easy to forget that it is spirit rated, Ward of Protection, lets you trade a horror for cancelling a card revelation effect. I don't have to tell you that Ward of Protection is a great card, you all know that already. But yeah, there's a couple of like auto-lose cards if you're playing like close to the edge, or maybe you're just really not wanting to deal with some kind of frozen in fear effect when you only have 3 willpower. On the other hand, innate is a skill trait. We see a lot of these also come back in Silas decks, but I think in Hank it has a slightly different feeling. Specifically, because Hank has such a high combat, I think quick thinking is fantastic in him. 5 combat and then 6 combat if you switch to his Warden Resolute side means that succeeding by 2 to get that extra action is not going to be a problem. And personally, I find extra actions most valuable when I'm dealing with enemies, because that's when I'm most likely to be like tight on action and really need to do whatever I need to do and get out or kill the enemy. And survivors don't tend to have the most damage compression, so getting an extra action, that's great. True Understanding is a testless clue if you can succeed on a different test. Has to be an ability on a scenario card, so that be a Rotting Remains test. It could be some kind of location test, but either way, if you succeed, you can discover a clue. Hank's not great at investigating, but this is a way for him to pick up a clue if he needs to. Daring leans into what he is good in, which is fighting, but he's also not a bad evader, and keep in mind that Survivor has a lot of agility boosting stuff. I could definitely see Daring making a splash in a bunch of Hank decks, just because, you know, extra cards is good. He has that slightly bigger deck size, and so having a couple of extra cantrips, that's just great. And then while I was putting these slides together, I realized that, hey, if you're going in the assistant mode for Hank, you have a 3-3-4-4 stat line. That's actually a great stat line for Savant. This is a wild icon and then additional wild icons equal to the lowest skill that is not being tested. Even without something like Dark Horse boosting all of your stats, this is going to be 4 wild icons on any test. And you can even commit it to other people if they need it. And then if you're not going with the assistant mode and going Warden instead, it's not as great, but it's still 4 wild icons on an intellect test, which is your lowest stat. So maybe that's still pretty good. So yeah, that's my first look at what Hank's deck building gets him. Again, I have no idea how I'm going to play. Well, that's not entirely true. I have some ideas about how I want to play him, but I haven't tested any of them yet. So give me a couple of weeks to try him out, and then I'll hopefully come back to you with some sort of deep dive, or at least a little bit more of a analysis grounded in actual gameplay. Moving along to the preview cards. First up, we have Arkham Horror LCG.RU, which is the Russian Arkham community, giving us 2 new cards, Providential and Vamp. Providential is a 2 XP survivor skill with willpower, combat, and wild icons. Don't forget that this card has icons. It's really important to the power level. It's innate and blessed, and then if this skill test is successful, you add blessed tokens to the chaos bag for each damage or horror on you, whichever is less. Courage is your best defense against whatever horrors lurk beyond. So, to explain this, let's say you have 4 damage and 0 horror, this adds 0 blessed tokens. Let's say you have 2 damage and 2 horror, you add 2 blessed tokens. So there's been a lot of discussion about the power level of this card. There are some people who are claiming that it is quite overcosted, that they don't think it should be 2 XP. They're comparing it to Signum Crucis. I think this card is a lot better than Signum Crucis, which is good because Signum Crucis was unchained to be 0 XP. I don't think it's quite Keep Fate levels of good, but I think one of the key things to remember here is, first of all, it just adds 2 icons to a combat or willpower test, which means it is basically an unexpected courage, which is very nice, right? I don't think that instantly makes it a 2 XP card, but it's a card that will help you pass tests, which is something that we want in this game. And then the amount of damage and horror on you is something that you can very much control. Long-time Calvin players will hopefully agree with me here that, yeah, you can set up situations where you have more damage or horror on you, and if you're in Survivor, you can still be safe, right? You have Leather Coats, you have Keepsakes, you have Jessica, you have Peter, you have other stuff, and especially when combined with the other big Survivor Bless engine, Spirit of Humanity, which you can exhaust to deal damage and horror to get 2 blast tokens in the Chaos bag, Providential becomes this bless engine where, sure, early on in the scenario, this card is actually pretty bad, right? You're not going to have a lot of damage and horror on you. But as you grind through and as you have ways of adding damage and horror on you, this can easily commit and give you 4, 5, 6. I can see this card adding 7 blessed tokens for a single commit. And keep in mind that in the faction with resourceful people, I don't think that this card should be 0 XP. I think this card is quite solid as it sits. And if you're asking how do you get 7 blessed tokens out of this, doesn't that just kill you? Well, if you're Stella, the answer is no. But the other card that can of course help you here is 5 of Pentacles. 5 of Pentacles gives you +1 health, +1 sanity. It is a tarot from the Circle Undone. And a lot of people have said that this is basically a 1/1 soak if you are not doing something with the damage and horror on you, which is entirely fair. I think that it is tricky to set up situations where this is more than just 1 extra damage and horror you can take. But Providential is one of those cards that let you do that. It is also a card that I've wanted to talk about anyway, because I think it's a good Hank card, right? Keep in mind, Hank basically gets 2 health bars, because when he's defeated the first time, he then goes into his Resolute mode, which has a new health and sanity pool. 5 of Pentacles let you double dip. So yeah, put that card in your deck, put Providential in your deck, try it out. I don't know how solid it will be in practice, and I definitely heard some complaints that on Hardened Expert, you might be a little bit more risky to take a lot of damage and horror, but I think if Providential is routinely adding 4 blesses to the bag for a card that also commits for willpower, combat, wilds, I think that's perfectly sensible for 2 XP. Alright, moving on to Vamp. Vamp is a 0 XP, 1 cost rogue event. It is a trick, and it says Parlay. Choose an enemy at your location, test any skill 3. If you succeed and you tested willpower, remove a doom from that enemy. Intellect, discover a clue at your location. Agility, automatically invade that enemy. If it is not elite, move it to a connecting location. Combat, deal 2 damage to that enemy. This card is amazing. None of the modes on it are particularly powerful, and I had somebody Love you, Dante, but you misunderstood, I think, what I said when I said this is not a card, and none of these modes are powerful, right? The combat mode is probably just worse sneak attack. The agility is just a basic evade, basically, or it's like, it's not bait and switch, is it? Yeah, it's bait and switch. Intellect, it is just one clue, you could just be working a hunch. And the willpower, it's like, why aren't you just killing the enemy, if it's such a problem? But the reality is that having all 4 of these modes on a single card and being able to get any of them with a difficulty 1 test because of fine clothes makes it a really, really powerful card. And I am standing by that. This is a very powerful card. It's just that none of the individual modes are particularly powerful. We've already seen this card, or I've already seen this card in Alessandra, because we were trying Alessandra and Carcosa. This has already removed Doom from an enemy that was like an elite big boss enemy that we couldn't deal with otherwise. I've already seen it kill a bunch of enemies with the combat mode. I've already seen it be used when Alessandra walked into a location lost action. She only had her parlay action left, a big enemy spawned on her, and it's like, no worries, I'll just evade him, and then we can deal with it next turn. I think the other big thing with this card, and part of the reason why it is quite powerful, is Eldritch Tongue. So one use of Vamp, often not going to be that impressive, but if you can recur it, that's really good. And we saw Eldritch Tongue earlier this preview season. It uses 4 charges, and you can play events with Parlay from your discard pile. You have to spend a charge and remove the card from the game, but this is a great way to get more value out of your Vamp. Again, I think the card is really powerful, even if none of the individual modes are that strong. The ability to do any of them at a moment's notice, you just need an enemy there, and most of these modes care about the enemy anyway. This is a really nice card. Put them in your decks. Moving on, we have Rey State Names previews, which are 2 XP rogue cards that are both parlay themed. It's really cool. So first up, we have Snitch. 1 cost, 2 XP rogue event, intellect and agility icon. It is favor and trick traded. Fast. Play if you succeed at a skill test while parlaying. Discover 2 total clues from among your location and connecting locations. I shouldn't be telling you this, but since you seem trustworthy, I don't think it is hyperbole for me to say that this is probably the strongest card I'll be talking about today. Just tacking on a phrase seeking answers to whatever parlay you're doing seems incredibly generous. You don't need to succeed at another test, and importantly, you only play this after you succeed at the test already, so there's no risk with Snitch, right? You're never gonna fail a parlay and then go, oh, now I have to discard my Snitch because I didn't succeed at this parlay. No, you succeed at whatever it is, and then you play the Snitch, where something like Seeking Answers, if you draw an auto-fail, then it is just wasted. And that's incredible. 2 free clues, well, you're paying 1 for it, and it's fast. Teslas at your location or connecting locations. This card is incredible. It is a huge boon to the parlay deck, because one of the tricks that parlay decks can sometimes run into is you don't have any enemies around, or you're just like struggling to get clues the normal way. This solves so much of that, and it's just a generally powerful card. Like, I can now see myself putting this into a deck that doesn't even have that many parlay cards, just because I'm like playing Lucky Cigarette Case 3, and I can grab the parlay card, and then just go, okay, boom, I'll parlay this enemy to like grift them or something just to get some money, and also I get 2 clues for free. This seems fantastic. Snitch seems like a very powerful card, worth putting in your decks, worth building around if you're going a parlay strategy. And then we have Stir the Pot, which is a capstone, like powerful 5 XP event. 3 cost, rogue, willpower and intellect icons. It is trick and it is gambit traded. And it reads parlay. Choose an enemy at your location and test intellect X, where X is the chosen enemy's combined damage and horror values. If you succeed, deal X damage to each enemy at your location. After this effect resolves, you may disengage from each enemy and move to a connecting location. And I heard he calls you stupid too. So this is a little bit silly, a little bit over the top, but also really fun. It is basically a Storm of Spirit through Dynamite Blast style effect. It lets you take out a whole bunch of enemies potentially. And if you are doing parlay, odds are you have a lot of tricks to manipulate where enemies are positioned. You're probably keeping a bunch more enemies around. So I can see this card doing a lot of damage. But admittedly, doing a bunch of damage to enemies that are only alive because you've kept them alive this long, right? If you're not doing any parlay shenanigans, often you're just killing enemies as soon as they show up. With parlay, you might want to keep them around a bit longer, and then Stir the Pot is like, nope, this is getting out of hand, it's time to clear the board. There's also a couple of like boss enemies that you can use this to take them out. Typically, you're going to need 2 copies, but again, we talked about Eldritch Tongue already, so that's totally going to work. And keep in mind that Fine Clothes doesn't reduce the amount of damage you're going to deal with this effect, it just reduces the difficulty of the intellect test. And to top it all off, you get a free elusive when you play this. Granted, I'm never going to play this card just for the elusive, but the fact that even if I don't kill every enemy at a location, I still get to slip away and make sure that I don't get killed, that's really nice. I really like that. I like that I can kill maybe a couple of smaller enemies, maybe a swarm of enemies if you're playing Dream Eaters, and then slip away, leaving whatever's left there for somebody else to worry about, in the typical rogue fashion. Very cool card. Obviously, 5 XP, you're not going to play this all the time, but it is very fun. Alright, and now we're on to the Great Old Ones Gaming previews, which are 4 whole cards. Pretty exciting. Guided by Faith, Hold Up, Belt Shipment, and Persistence. Guided by Faith is a 0 XP, 2 cost Guardian event with Spirit and Bless traits. Investigate. You may use your willpower instead of your intellect for this investigation. Before revealing Chaos tokens for this test, add 2 Bless tokens to the Chaos bag. If a Bless or Elder Sign token is revealed during the skill test, discover 1 additional clue at your location. This is a pretty neat effect. Combining an Investigate with adding Bless tokens kind of makes the effect fast. Now, it's no Keep Fate, it's only adding 2 Bless tokens, but it's more than nothing, and it's nice to have either way. The other thing is that, obviously, getting an extra clue out of this makes it pretty nice. That puts it on par with effects like Redesigns or Deduction. If you're having to gamble on that Bless token or Elder Sign, it's a little tricky, but there are ways of guaranteeing that you're going to pull those, either with some kind of token manipulation out of Mystic, or if you're running something like Favor of the Sun from the Intimate Conspiracy that can guarantee you resolve a Bless token. I think that this card is pretty good. It's certainly not going to blow anybody out of the water, but if you're doing a Bless heavy team, there are a lot of worse cards you could be running, and maybe you put this in early and then take it out later once other people have their clue getting well under control with some XP, but just adding 2 Bless tokens to the bag and then getting 2 clues, that's always going to be a fantastic deal for 2 cost 0 XP. Moving on, we have Hold Up. It's a 1 cost 0 XP Guardian event, combat and agility icons. It is tactic and trick traded. Parlay, choose an enemy at your location and an item asset in your hand. Perform a fight action against the chosen enemy. If you succeed, instead of dealing damage, play the chosen asset, reducing its cost by each point you succeed by. Hands where I can see them. Oh, okay. This is a card that is a lot harder to put in your deck. The problem here being that, first of all, it doesn't do anything if you don't have an enemy at your location. It also only works on item assets. So if you have an expensive ally or something like that, no dice. You have to do a fight action, so you're taking a skill test. And your benefit is based on the amount of points you succeed by. So you need a pretty high combat value to make this work. And also you don't get to deal any damage. So your fight test is pretty much useless, normally. I try to be very positive here. And not going to lie, this card is throwing me for a little bit of a loop. So the challenge here is, there's only a few items in the... So, okay, let's go back to basics. What is a good economy card? A good economy card is better than Emergency Cash. Emergency Cash, 0 cost, gain 3. For this card to be Emergency Cash levels of money, you need to gain an item for 4 less than its printed cost. That's a lot you have to succeed by. Right, you have to put in, you're probably going to have to commit something, or you're going to have to be using a weapon. Now that is one of the upsides here. You can use weapons. While this is being used, you don't get a discount on the ammo cost. So your gun, you're still firing a bullet, I guess, into the air to threaten them and get them to hand over the goods. But there might be something here with some of the 5 combat guardians that have like a machete or some other kind of weapon that gives +2 combat bonus. And then you can get your big gun, like your Thompson, into play for free. Another combo that I've seen might show up is something like Stunning Blow. This is a trick, so you can put it in Rita. And then Stunning Blow allows you to also let the attack become an automatic evade. So, hey, that bonus action you're getting, that's certainly not wasted, right? Instead of getting the fight that deals no damage, the fight still doesn't do any damage, but you get a free evade. That's not nothing. And then, of course, this is a parlay, so any of the parlay shenanigans matter. I don't know how many situations there are where you fighting somebody and not dealing any damage is actually a benefit. I can think of one, which is the Harbinger of Felucia. But in either way, if you have some way of benefiting of like fine clothes or well dressed, boosting a fight test, maybe that's something. We're really reaching here, but I have found one place where I think this card makes a bit of sense at least, and that's actually Tony Morgan, who is not a Guardian, it's a rogue, but he can take Guardian 0-1 events and skills. And the reason why I like this in Tony is Tony really likes the fact that this doesn't provoke attacks opportunity, lets you play one of his guns while you're engaged with an enemy without having to get hit. Because a lot of the Guardians, I would say, don't really mind getting hit once by an enemy, right? They have a lot of soak, they have cancels, dodges, stuff like that. Tony's pretty fragile. 2 willpower, 5 sanity. He's like, if he gets hit once, he can be in dire straits. So that's tricky. Tony's got 5 combat, so odds are he can play this for pretty nice. And he also has some pretty nice items out of the rogue side, so even if he's already got his gun down, he might have like a cigarette case or something like that to play. Again, I'm not like the hugest on this card in Tony, but if you put this card in Tony, I at least go, yeah, okay, I can see that, right? It's like a narrow escape style situation, right? You're not playing this because you want it for the economy benefit, you're doing this because it lets you play a weapon without having to pay the attack of opportunity cost. That's not nothing. Is it better than Sleight of Hand? Absolutely not. Is it still fun? Yeah, maybe. You know, if you're doing a parlay thing in Tony, go for it, right? Like it's a thing. This is definitely a card that I think needs you to do something else with it in order for it to be good. Because as written, it's just put Mercy Cash in your deck and just get the 3 resources and play your gun. Right, that's the other thing. Guardians are not the faction that want to play their gun after the enemies enter play. They want to put their gun into play early because that's how Guardians roll. Alright, moving on to cards that I'm way more excited about. It's Spell Shipment. It's a null-cost asset, but it is not permanent. It's very important. This is not a permanent asset. It's 0 XP, item and supply traded. While Pelt Shipment is in your hand, your maximum hand size is reduced by 3. When the game ends or you resign, if Pelt Shipment is in your hand, reduce the experience cost of the next new card you purchase before the next scenario by 1. So you don't get the bonus on upgrading, but you do get just a bonus point of XP, which is great. So this is a funky card. Worth keeping in mind that it reduces your hand size by 3, but it itself will also be taking up a slot in your hand, so you're basically down to 4 cards in hand. If you have 2 of these, that's your entire hand, because your hand size will be 2, and you have 2 of these. That's very interesting. There are definitely survivor decks that can play all their stuff from the discard pile. I'm thinking cards like Winging It. Obviously, Yorick can do a lot of recursion. But having no cards in hand is actually kind of tricky. But I do think that a lot of decks, survivor decks, will be happy to put at least 1 copy of this in their deck. And just, try to kind of manage it until the end. And then you get your bonus point of XP. Maybe this is only in your deck for the first couple of scenarios. So you can kind of kickstart your more powerful engine. And it is worth saying that if you don't have something like Cornered, like some of these improvised cards, they're just not cards you want to play. And so getting to discard them essentially for free thanks to Pelt Shipment might actually just be an upside. There's also, of course, Scavenging. I love talking about Scavenging. I love talking about Scavenging so much. But specifically, because this is an item, there might be kind of like a combo-y... the combo is a big word, but basically the idea is you put Pelt Shipment in your discard pile, and then by the time you get to the end of the scenario, on your last turn, you make sure to scavenge the Pelt Shipments back to your hand, and then resign, so you don't actually have the drawback of smaller hand size. On that note, something I want to point out is Backpack has been in discussion with this card a bit, because it is an item. It's also supply. But keep in mind that while it is attached to Backpack, it is not in your hand. So you won't have to deal with the smaller hand size, but you also just won't get the XP cost, or the XP benefit. That doesn't mean that Backpack is bad, or that this is bad in Backpack decks. It just means that you need to have a way to get rid of the Backpack, and that could just be play a second Backpack, so that you can put this into the bin, and then you can scavenge it, right? If it's stuck under your Backpack, then you're not getting the XP benefit. Same for Stick to the Plan. This is a supply card. You can put it under Stick to the Plan where it will do nothing. Don't do that. And last card for the year already. Wow, time flies. It's Persistence. It's a 1 XP survivor skill with a single walled icon. It's innate. And it simply reads, you may commit Persistence to a skill test from your discard pile. If you do, shuffle it into your deck after the test ends. Anyone but a stoic farmer would have fainted or gone mad. H.P. Lovecraft, The Color Out of Space. So this is a improvised card that doesn't have the improvised trait. Dang you, FFG. Why have you done this to me? But it is just basically an unexpected courage by way of improvised. So you get a wild icon on the first commit, and then you get a wild icon on the second commit. That's not amazing for 1 XP. If it was 0 XP, that would actually be a pretty good deal. But fortunately, there are tons of ways to make this much more powerful than just 2 wild icons. Whether that is throwing it into corners, you get +2 on the first time, and then you get a single wild on the second time. Whether that's something like Grisly Totem, and you get free extra icons and card draw. Maybe you're short supplying this, and it just ends up in your discard pile, and you basically start with an extra skill in your hand, as it were. Or maybe you're doing something like Ashcan Pete or Wendy, where you throw this out to their ability, and then you still get a extra commit down the line. I don't think this card is terribly tricky, but it is certainly useful. I think one of the things that has impressed me about the improvised suite of cards is that because you shuffle them into your deck after you play them from your discard pile, that then means you get to draw them again, which means you get to discard them again, which means you get to play them for your discard pile again, and so on and so forth. And so you often find that with these engine decks that really want to discard a bunch of cards, Cornered, Wendy, Ashcan Pete, etc., you are throwing this card out to your abilities way more often than like once or twice per deck cycle, right? You are often doing this 4 or 5 times. And this isn't the new Winging It to me. Like, I think Winging It is strong enough that it'll probably still take the place. But Persistence is really nice, and just random wild icons here and there, that's great. Just getting your stat up from that 2 over to 3 over if the bag is a little leaning heavy, or maybe you're just we really can't fill this test and I'm 3 over, but I need to get to that 4 over just in case. Bang, Persistence will get you there. And yeah, I really like this card. I think it's a great place for a 1 XP card to be. It's not too powerful, but there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. That's it from me. Have a wonderful 2024. It's been a heck of a year, as it has been the last few years, and I hope you all have a great new year. Stay safe, keep all your fingers intact if you're playing with fireworks, because you need those fingers to play Arkham with. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.